Hi, friends. Welcome to Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Klingenfield. Thank you so much for joining me today. We have another amazing guest joining me on the show. But before I tell you about her, I want to share some exciting news with you about Homeward, the sponsor of my show. So, Homeward is the #1 provider of parenting seminars in America, and they are inviting you to become a certified family ministry speaker and coach. Pass It On is the new name for this exciting opportunity, which better describes this entire experience. Dr. Jim Burns, the trainer of trainers, is available digitally or in person to help you become a certified Homeward Family Ministry speaker and coach. The content you'll receive will be all yours to personalize as you lead a small group, speak, write, or even host your very own podcast. The opportunities are endless, and you'll be better equipped to go wherever God leads you to help families, small groups, or entire congregations. You can also take the training just to learn more about parenting, marriage, and families. And with the help of Dr. Jim Burns and the Pass It On team, you could be one of those leaders. Get all your questions answered at homeward.com. That's homeward.com. All right, so back to my show. Did you know that 20% of youths ages 12 to 17 struggle with major depressive episodes just in 2024? Now, that's 13% have even struggled with serious suicide thoughts. Yet, 56% of those youth report that they did not receive any mental health treatment. Our kids are struggling with real struggles that impact their identity, value, and ultimately their life. Thankfully, we have people who are called to work with youth, giving them tools and equipment and encouragement to battle the mental health struggles. And my guest today, Jennifer Barnes, is one of those amazing people that I have known for over a decade. Jennifer is a licensed K-6 educator with over 14 years of experience in the field of education and suicide prevention. Since 2017, Jennifer has been a speaker for the Respect team. She is now the organization's director of operations. Since the age of 17, Jennifer has been impacting her community by facilitating a suicide loss survivor support group called We the Living and working with educational nonprofits and schools themselves. She trains individuals and students in mental health and wellness programs. Jennifer is a QPR, which stands for Question, Persuade, Refer Master Trainer, and a Lutheran Foundation mental health advocate. Let's get to my interview now with Jennifer Barnes on this edition of Embracing Your Season. Well, I have an amazing guest with me today, Jennifer Barnes. Jennifer, you and I have known each other, gosh, for at least over a decade. Is that right now?
Yeah, it's been some time
It's
for
been
sure.
a minute, but what I love about our connection is that we are both very passionate about helping youth navigate this world and especially some of the tougher topics. So, again, thanks so much for joining me on the show today and sharing all of your wisdom.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
So let's start out with tell us a little bit about yourself and your family because I love for people to know you just a little bit more.
I am the director of programming for a nonprofit here in Fort Wayne called the Respect Team, and I've been a speaker actually for about 8 years. So really, I kind of live and breathe Respect Team. It's definitely my favorite thing career wise that I've been able to do. I have a beautiful daughter named Sophie, and she just went to middle school this year.
Oh
So
my
interesting
goodness.
transition. She loves it, but man, time flies. I have
Mhm.
an amazing husband, a saint of a man named Andy Barnes, and he is probably my #1 supporter. Like, I'm only sitting here put together today because he set me up. He's my tech guy. So,
Oh, love that. And
yeah.
I hear he's a fan of the show, so this is even better. He's gonna have his wife on the show. I just think it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi,
Uh,
honey. Yeah, he definitely listens to you on the regular. So I'm definitely, I struggle to be a podcast person. I need to
mhm.
work on that, but he absolutely loves it. So he's always given me all the things he's learning from your podcast as well as many others. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's
love it.
awesome. Well, we love that he joins us and we love your family. And again, thank you for your wisdom. And let's talk a little bit more about what you do. So, the Respect Team, first off, is an amazing thing that we offer within the school system, at least in Indiana, and it's all over. And you could tell us more about that. But tell us also about how transformative it is when we allow programs like this into the school system.
Well, from my viewpoint, which is pretty cool because now I can be on the back end and the front end as a speaker for the last 8 years, we really get to the root of just relationships, relational conversations. We really work well with just bringing it down to an understandable level for students. So we really, in a nutshell, discuss respect of self, others, and all. And what does that look like? How does that look like in our day to day? My favorite thing to really talk to youth about is, ghosting. When you're putting somebody on red, why are you doing that? A lot of students nowadays, I mean, they're breaking up by just ghosting. They just block somebody and they don't talk to them ever again. And we have conversations about why is that not helpful? Why is that a really
Mhm.
bad pattern to get into? What does that do to the other person on the other side of that phone, right? So I just love that we use everyday conversations. We use our own storytelling. We really facilitate conversations, and then from that, we get a lot of feedback. So we have students fill out an anonymous kind of survey at the end of like what did you learn, and I will say that is better than my pay because I love to see that, you know what, on those days where you think, did anybody hear anything, you can instantly see they heard something. And actually this week in middle school, the top comment that I have gotten is they taught me that I need to be a kinder person. And I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, you know what? That's a really cool impact to walk away from and say, I got to help students learn to be kinder today.
Wow. And isn't it that fascinating that that is something that they've had to learn? It's probably not that they're being not being taught that in their homes, but that it's spoken over them by another adult or within their peer system, and they realize, "These are things I can integrate in my day," and kindness is a huge deal in the peer relationships. I love that you get to integrate that in your sessions. S
Absolutely. I love what you just said too. Sorry. I just want to say, as a parent, right? The things I teach in my home, I know my daughter sometimes can roll her eyes or maybe not. It doesn't sink in as much, right? But if you tell her
Right.
something, it's going to click. Or if, her best friend's mom says something, she's going to hear it more. So you're right. I think that even if it's being taught at home, it's so good to hear it from multiple people.
Mhm, exactly. So one of the areas that Respect Team likes to hit on in additional, and let's talk about your background as well in a to other organizations that you partner alongside is suicide awareness, suicide ideation, and you've had your own experience with this. Tell us a little bit more about how that then has made you more passionate about educating people.
So for me, I have had an awful lot of loss. I've lost five different people in different ways over different decades. But I would say the two most impactful losses for me was my very good friend in high school named Alicia, and then my dad. My dad's was the one that really, obviously, threw my entire life for a loop. I always wanted to be a teacher, and I got to be a first grade teacher for about 4 years. And then God called me to do something else. And I realized, you know what? I have a more impactful story. There's something else I can do here. So, from that, I've gotten to be able to have some really cool accreditations, training, things like that. I'm a master QPR trainer. QPR stands for Question, Persuade, Refer, and it's really an international model of suicide prevention. So that's one of the things that the Respect Team is actually bringing on for students here in January, but we offer that to adults right now. And what I love about that is it teaches people that QPR is so similar to CPR. We
Mm,
talk about CPR, we model that, we work through that. It's awkward, right, when we do those things, but we feel more equipped to go out into the world, and we know that, you know what, if I get faced with this, I have to use it. And QPR is kind of the same thing. It's where you just learn how to question. Yes, it's uncomfortable, just like doing CPR would be uncomfortable, but it really makes you feel more equipped to deal with everyday life situations where you don't know if it's somebody on the street, you know, you learn the warning signs, or if it's somebody in your home or somebody that you encounter through work or school or whatever. And I think a lot of times youth, that's so impactful for, because youth are on the front lines. I mean, they're the ones that get texts at 2 or 3 in the morning from a suicidal
right.
friend, and
Mhm.
that's a lot to hold on to. I mean, as an adult, I am equipped with all the skills. I've been trained, but still, if I got a text like that, it would take me back, right? So we
Mhm.
wanna make sure that students are getting equipped to know what to do. It's not that they have to jump in and be the therapist and save their friend in that capacity. It's, "Okay, what trusted adults do I have? What resources do I have? Let's get them to those resources and persuade them to be able to utilize those. That's really all it is. And so I absolutely love just being able to take my passion in trying to see that, I want everybody to know how valuable they are. Um, I've lost so many people because they couldn't see that they were valuable and worthy of getting help and support. I think
Mm.
in my dad's case, he grew up thinking that, therapy was the enemy and talking about your emotions makes you less of a person. But the reality is, I am only here because I have done the opposite. I have learned to talk to a therapist. I've got my own trusted adults, people that have adulted longer than I have. I've had to find, medication, tools, lots of things, and because of that I'm here. And so I hope that's the legacy that I can leave my daughter and her friends and this next generation is it's absolutely okay to not be okay, but what can we do with that? Like, you have to take that and use it for good. You have to, force yourself to kind of work through that, and accept whatever help you need in whatever capacity that looks like.
And here's what I think is so scary is that, when I'm brought into the conversation, obviously as a clinician, sometimes these parents tell me that they had no clue that their kiddo, I mean, middle schooler, high schooler has been struggling with dark thoughts. And oftentimes it's the parent finds texts to their friends that indicate
Mhm.
that their child is struggling. And so the parent, of course, has no clue how to navigate this.
Right.
Is very, very scary. If I saw that in my own kids' text messages, that would be so overwhelming. But what parents out there need to know is that kids are struggling. Like, this is a hard world. And the way that kids are dealing with the reality of tribulations and struggles is different because their coping skills are not up to the level that they should be in a healthy way. And so,
Mhm.
unfortunately, wanting to go to sleep and never wake up again becomes an actual solution to their problems. And so,
Yeah.
this is why, as you indicated, educating teens on how to have this conversation, educating adults how to have this conversation, because this is a real issue as a whole. And I'm certain that even we're probably seeing an increase since COVID. You've been in the school system for 8 years. I'm sure that you have seen some differences. Are you seeing any trends in regards to mental health for teens or relationships since 2020?
I would say for sure people are talking about it more. I mean, the youth are talking about mental health in a very normal way, which absolutely brings me hope, right? But sometimes it can go a little bit farther than that. So I mean, they have access to things that we just didn't have. I always like to tease the kids and say, like, I'm pre-Google, guys. So I mean, if I didn't know what something meant, like, I'd have to go find a dictionary or ask someone. But I mean, they have instant access. So if they have questions or if they want to know things, it's in their TV programming. I mean, I asked seventh graders this week, raise your hand if you've seen Jenny and Georgia, which is a great show for adults. And it has a lot of things
Mm,
with like self harm and things like that in there. Who's seen 13 Reasons Why? Who has watched Shameless, which is probably one of the most adult shows I've ever seen. I've had to shut it off as an adult. And it breaks my heart that 12-year-olds are raising their hand and they're watching it with
wow.
no
Yeah.
adult, nobody to discuss any of those really adult themed things that they're seeing. So for me, what I see is a desensitization. It's where they are becoming desensitized to really traumatic things because they're either exposed to it through TikTok or social media, maybe just their friends sharing, using maybe social media that way, or the things that they're watching, even the music they're listening to. It's great that students have music that they can relate to if they're
Hmm.
suicidal and things like that. However, if that's all they're listening to, that's not going to bring you into a very positive headspace. So I think sometimes it's great that they're talking about it, but I don't necessarily know that they're talking about it in the most productive and healthy way. So that's a concern. And I would really say, again, the addiction to the phone. I mean, some school districts I go into, they literally have to put the phones away in a locked pouch to get students to participate.
Wow.
Other
Yeah.
schools, yeah, other schools maybe it's a little bit different, but it's like they feel like they have to have constant access to one another. I had one student once. This was last year, and I can still see her face. It broke my heart. She said, the presentation was great. I really liked talking to you, but I was a little distracted. I grabbed my boyfriend's phone because I think he's cheating on me. And I was going through his DMs all through class. And so that's what I was looking at. So I'm sorry if I was distracted. And I'm like, hold
Wow.
up. Wait, what? So, they're taking each other's phones and going through each
Mhm.
other's phones and things like that during school. So it's like, how could you possibly have learned anything? Let's say that was math or English or I don't know, anything pertinent. I'm just a one day speaker, but how are you getting anything in life if that's your day to day where you have this constant panic and anxiety that is really promoted from that phone use?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's so interesting because speaking of taking each other's phones, so what I have learned is that when teens are grounded from their phone, they want to maintain Snapchat streaks, which is like with a bunch of oh, what's the word? Not accomplices. What's the word? Acquaintances. Okay, I'm going to say that again. So they want to maintain their Snapchat streaks with just acquaintances. So like school friends, people maybe they've never even really met in real life, but they want to maintain this because somehow this is a big deal and it's an identity statement. So because they're grounded from their phones, their friends know their passcodes to get in to continue the streaks with those random people. And so interestingly enough, my daughter got into a fight with a friend because she was not allowed to be on her phone for whatever reason. I think she came in late for her curfew, and her friend started reading my daughter's DMs with other people to see who was not talking kindly about her. And then that was the fight. And my daughter's like, wait, you read my text? Like, what? So now it's like, all of these fights are happening because they're exposed to each other's inner worlds when they really should have boundaries, and no one has boundaries anymore, and it just
Sure.
causes so much tension and drama, and it's just, geez, what do we do with that, right?
Absolutely. And it's hard for us as parents to navigate because I mean, again, I grew up in a completely different world. I mean, I remember a time where I didn't even have a cell phone,
Mm,
and I
right.
survived. So,
I know.
um, but I don't think people could, and I won't lie. I mean, if you took my phone today, like, yeah, that would be hard for me because yeah, I mean, that's how I socialize, it's how I do my work, I
That's right.
understand, but I think when youth are handed that at a very young age when maybe they haven't been equipped with how to have boundaries and how to set limits with yourself, then it becomes a free for all for some students and some youth, and then it's a really hard habit to break.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know statistically, even that research has come out that due to technology and the overstimulus, that we are all affected by that with our brains. We're losing our ability to focus. We're losing our ability to have face-to-face communication in a healthy way. Like
Right.
it really is altering. But yet, like you said, taking that away even from ourselves, that's now how we connect with others. We stay up to date with calendars and information. And so it's like we all need to just take a step back and kind of just go back to this age where we're not so dependent on these things, but that's countercultural. And so making maybe some little steps in all those ways. But going back to the respect team, one of the things that I love about what you guys do is the conversation topics that you offer within the school system, which is so powerful. You come into the health classes, both in middle school and high school, and you talk about some of these harder conversations. Can you share a little bit about what topics you guys address?
Yeah, so really, at sixth grade level, we talk about respect and friendships, and what does that look like to be a positive and negative friend. We talk about chosen family, trusted adults, those types of things. In seventh grade, we really just talk about self, like what does it look like to be you? Why are you proud to be you? And then what threatens that view of yourself? In eighth grade, it's really all of that, and just how do we respect other people and see their value. We talk a lot about mental health. We start talking about boundaries and relationships with our body, with our mind, with our social life and future. And then all of that at the high school level, we talk about how can you have an assertive conversation? How do you have discourse with somebody when you're frustrated with them? How do you do that productively in a way that is not, cussing them out or ghosting them? Because, you
Yeah,
know, there's
not
there's
productive.
both sides of the coin, and yeah, they're both not productive at all. And then we really at the end of that we discuss consent, and I think a lot of students have never even heard that word, or they have no understanding of what consent actually is. Maybe they've heard it, but they don't understand what does that actually look like. And obviously at the high school level we do discuss consent within a dating sexual relationship, but consent is simply, if I take a picture of you and I put it on Instagram without asking you, I didn't ask your consent. So consent really
Mhm.
goes for so much more than a dating relationship. But we really want them to understand that they have value first and foremost. And then we actually walk them through the steps of intimacy and how intimacy is not sex. Intimacy is it's this. It's having relational conversation. It's trusting somebody. You can do that with anybody, but you want to make sure that you really form the pillars of your relationship before you move on. I always tell students, everybody knows the story of the three little pigs. And
Mm.
so when I say who remembers, like they know it. And I always say steps 1 through 6 when we're looking at the packet, that is the house of bricks. That's what you want in a friendship. That's what you want in a dating relationship. You want to make sure that you have that trust built before you ever move on to anything else. Because, if you move into that straw house, I always say when a straw house blows up, imagine all the little pieces of straw you got to pick up. Like there's a lot of drama. So we want to make sure, I'm not there to say when for them. They have to figure it out. But I am that friendly reminder of what could go wrong, how when you cross boundaries, respect is lost, and you really can't come back from that. You can say sorry, they can forgive you, but it's always going to be different. Your relationship
Mhm.
has changed. So how do we have conversations that are productive? How do we go into work relationships, friendships? How do I live with people at home? How do I interact with different adults that I have to interact with every day? What does that look like, and how do I do that productively versus maybe the way I'm doing it?
Hmm. I mean, it's so amazing the conversation topics that you guys have about relationships. These are conversations that should be happening at home, right? And many times they are, but as we talked about earlier, sometimes our kids don't hear it the same way that they hear it from maybe someone like you. Here's the problem within our school system, our public school system, and that's all I'm speaking of because I'm unfamiliar if the Christian school system and
Right.
homeschool is probably different in their curriculum, but the public school system does not speak about these things. That's why we have nonprofit organizations like the Respect Team, which is an Indiana organization at this point, coming into the schools because it's absolutely necessary. Where are these kids supposed to get this information from? They're not. And so that's why it is so important. And I get so passionate because I worked in the school system as a clinician, working with these students. That's how I was coming alongside the Respect Team and Jennifer herself. But I'm realizing that we as parents have to be speaking to the school board, the government level school boards, telling them organizations like this, conversations like this have to be happening because they're not always happening at home. And they're not equipping our kids to real life stuff. So, the consent topic, for instance, Jennifer, I know you know this. I saw kids all the time come into my office and talk about going to a party on the weekend. They got intoxicated, they don't remember, but do what happened, but they remember waking up and being in a situation where they did not provide consent. This stuff is happening all the time. Now, on the other side, like you said, just even the consent of posting pictures online, it can go to that extreme as well because you can't always take that stuff down. It does have a huge impact. So, these conversations about consent, about relationships, about respect, all of these are paramount in how we're raising our kids. And it's interesting for me because I have two girls, two boys, right? I've had the conversation with my girls for a very long time from the perspective of be mindful of your body, be mindful of your words, and you have every right to say no and expect it to be done. Whereas my boys, it's interesting how I lean more towards definitely talking about consent with their own bodies, but respecting the consent of someone else outside of their bodies. And it's
Mm.
interesting to me. And I think that's just probably because of my experience of usually having girls within my office of saying that they were taken advantage by boys. I don't want my boys to be in a circumstance where their integrity comes into question, where they might be challenged if they did receive consent. So I am like hitting that hard in our house of just talking about making sure that you are in relationships where you respect one another, that this
Mhm.
person does not belong to you, you are not married to them, you are not their parent, and you need to respect them in every single way with words, actions, and behavior. So for you, Jennifer, to go in the school system and talk about this is foundational because they take these lessons out into the real world and then it's applied. And so, again, just so important that we have these stuff in our school systems. And so, again, just so appreciate what you guys do all across Northern Indiana, which is so great. But let's speak to the parents specifically. So, again, we know that sometimes these conversations are happening, sometimes kids are listening, and sometimes they're not. What are some recommendations about parent initiated conversations about some of these topics about respect and relationships and so forth?
I would say just try to weave it into your everyday conversation. I actually, when Sophie was about 4 or 5, we would start playing like uh-oh scenario. And at the dinner table, I would just throw a scenario like, somebody wants to take your stuffed animal away from you without asking, what would you do? And so now those scenarios maybe look a little bit differently. So she does not have social media and she probably won't have it for a while. I'm going to definitely be one of those parents, but we like to scroll together on occasion, like Facebook Reels, things like that. So that's something where she gets a little taste of how to navigate that. She sees the boundary line. I give her the boundary of like, listen, it's not good for me or for you to do this for hours. So, 5 minutes and that's what we're going to do. But we scroll together. And so, number one, that helps me to manage what her, brain is taking in, right? But if we see something, maybe a funny reel or something where people are involved or there's some type of communication issue or relationship issue, I can sit there and stop it and pause it and say, like, so what would you do in this situation? What do you think is appropriate? What do you think is kind? Was that respectful? So I think just everyday scenarios, just trying to point out, hey, do you think that was kind or respectful? Do you think that that was showing that other person value? What is your opinion? I would also say asking your own child's opinion and listening to it. I come from kind of my parents were fantastic parents, but I mean they were old school parents, right? What they said I did. I'm an only child, and so I was very much a rule follower, and had the fear of my parents, not necessarily in a bad way, but just in I just knew, what's the line? The line was always there, and I kind of knew. But I would say generationally, if I had pushed back on anything against my parents, I don't know that they would really have sat and listened to what my pushback was, right? I think sometimes it would have been like, well, I'm asking you to do this, so you need to go do it. Case in point, as my daughter ages, I love to share her on Facebook, right? She's my world. And I have shared her photos since she was a baby. And so while I'm mindful and I've always been mindful of how, now that she has a voice in that game and says like, "Actually, I don't want you to share that photo." Sometimes that hurts my mama heart, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, "Oh, but I really wanted to share it." But because I see her as a human being with value, not just a child, I realize, you know what? She is telling me a boundary right now. And if I'm not going to listen to her boundary, and she sees that, then what if a boyfriend someday wants to push her boundary and she
Mhm.
thinks, okay, well, I guess my parents didn't listen to me, so I guess whatever. That people pleaser, I'm a former people pleaser, trying to recover from that, right? So, I mean, I would say just treat your child how you would like to be treated too. And
Mhm.
it's not that sometimes it's just back talk, right? But sometimes when they have an opinion like that, like, hey, please don't share that picture of me on social media for whatever, whatever. Sometimes it's just they're really trying to find their voice. And if you let them try it with you in a safe space, then how much more powerful is that going to be as they learn and grow? And then that's really going to help strengthen your relationship for when they become an adult as well.
Gosh, I love that so much. And again, it's modeling, it's showing that they have worth and value, and what you were projecting at home will translate
Right.
with what they anticipate out of other relationships. That's so powerful. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. So, what about the teens out there? Maybe they'll get an opportunity to listen to this and they're struggling with some of their thoughts, their value, their worth. Maybe they're not at that place where they see that their life is worth living. What are some encouragement that you can give to them?
I would say number one, there's always help. There is help available in so many facets. The thing I love about Fort Wayne and Allen County is, you can call 211 and there are hundreds of different resources for hundreds of different problems. Sometimes it still astounds me how I can be 38 years old and I'm like, I didn't know that existed, right?
Yeah.
So if you have tried to find help and support before and it didn't work, maybe you didn't look in the best area or maybe the resources weren't necessarily appropriate for you. So I would say, Google can be your friend,
Mhm.
look up resources. I would say consider talking to a therapist. I know therapy is not for everybody. I tell most kids, it took 4 therapists to find the one that saved my life. For me,
That's good.
therapists are like a pair of jeans, right? Where, and I think
Mhm.
as a woman, you get this, like you could be a size, 8 in one pair of jeans and a size 12 in another. That's just how different brands are. So therapists are the same. So if you have tried therapy before and you hated it, try it again. Try with somebody else. It's not
That's
about
good.
you. It's really, it just wasn't a good fit. And I would say unpack whatever you're working through with a trusted adult or a trusted person. I'm always going to say trusted adult because, again, at 38, I have people that have adulted far longer than I have. My favorite trusted adult is Mr. Rusk. He's a former teacher I had at Snyder High School. He's 82. I'm sure he would not love me
Wow.
saying that to the world, but he is. And, at his age, if I throw something to him, he's probably seen it before, right? So
Mhm.
if I throw something to him, he can normally talk me down and make me realize, like, oh, okay, yeah, this isn't probably the big deal that I'm making it. So, same thing goes for students. Trusted adults, I'm always going to say, I want that to be your parent. However, I and we as an organization know it might not always be your parent. I mean, I am a parent of a sixth grader. Right now, I'm pretty much a trusted adult. My husband and I are, but I also have, chosen family in her life. She's got friends of mine that I purposely put in her life. She has a former fifth grade teacher who's a trusted adult. Like, I'm fine with that because it does take a village. And she doesn't
Yeah.
always need to hear my perspective because my perspective is going to be one way. I'm only going to see it one way, right? So she needs to see things lots of different ways. So make sure you talk to a trusted adult, trusted people. Um, Make sure you take a deep breath, take a nap. I'm going to tell you. Sometimes we're in that really bad headspace because we're tired, we're
Yeah.
exhausted, and sometimes we need to go to bed. Maybe we want to stay up and we want to watch Netflix and we want to talk to our friends, but like go to bed. Make sure
Mhm.
you've got food and you're hydrated because all those things also can have an effect on our emotions and what we're choosing to do. I would say reach out to 988. There's a great text crisis line here locally, 494949, takes you to Remedy Live. They're fantastic. They're going to sit there, they're going to chat with you 24 hours a day anonymously. And you guys, I've used that. I promise you I
Mhm.
have. Okay. Because I get that sometimes it's 2 in the morning and maybe your people are asleep or you don't want to bother your friends. Those people are there to talk to you and to listen to you. And a lot of times, just getting some stuff off your chest can make life a little bit more bearable and breathable.
Yeah.
And I'll also lastly just say, help and support looks different for everyone. So in my bloodline, I've lost my father and two cousins to suicide. And my mom, um, bless her, she kind of gave up after my dad died. So while her death wasn't a suicide, there was about 19 years of a really long watching her try to take her life in various ways. And I'm going to tell you, statistically, I shouldn't be here. And I'm an attempt survivor as well. The thing that has kept me going is I get my brain chemicals tested. It's called a neurotransmitter test. And you guys, I don't make serotonin and dopamine. I just don't. I can do all the things that promote those, but I don't make enough on my own. So I have to take those as a pill every day. And that used to bother me. But the reality is, if I don't take them, I could very well end up like a lot of my family. I have a
Mhm.
daughter that I want to be here for. I have a life that I love that I want to be here and invested for. And I'm not saying every day's perfect, nor am I perfect, but I need those pills. So what? Some people need glasses. Some people need wheelchairs. Some people, speak different languages. Like we all need what we all need, and that's okay. You just have to do the hard work sometimes to figure out what you need, what works, and then continually doing that for yourself.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful word. Powerful words. I just think it's going to lead parents as well, people that are struggling themselves to recognize all of these ways that they can actually cope in a healthy way. I love the fact that you're pointing out food and hydration and sleep and how those are foundational to making ourselves feel better, as well as increasing our resilience and tolerance to stress just from eating healthier foods and taking a nap. So praise the Lord for that, right? That's great.
Yes, for sure.
Oh, well, Jennifer, this has been such a pleasure. And again, thank you to you and to the Respect team for everything that you guys do for our kids locally, as well as just people like you in this world that truly want to encourage and help the youth who are truly struggling, as well as just equipping the parents out there. So, again, thanks so much for your wisdom. I know it's been really beneficial.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you so much. You're a wonderful person.
Friends, I hope that you enjoyed the conversation I had with Jennifer. I mean, isn't she amazing? She can work so well in bringing out the inner life of teenagers that she works with every day. And so I am just thankful personally as a mom of kids to have people like her in our school systems having these hard conversations with our kids, equipping them with real tools to help navigate relationships and some of these tougher mental health struggles that they're having. And so again, I'm just glad that she joined us today, but here are some of the takeaways. Maybe you've picked up on some as well. I think the first one that really stood out to me was using everyday scenarios in our homes to help equip our kids to navigate some harder circumstances. So, whether it's talking about kindness or how do we navigate giving consent, how do we help set our boundaries and make sure people are respecting our boundaries. I love how Jennifer was talking about her relationship with her daughter specifically and what would you do in this situation? So they're sitting and looking at reels and, a scenario pops up, they watch it and she stops and asks, "So was that kind? How would you handle that?" And so now it sets our kids up with real life circumstances, preparing them almost a script. So when that happens to them or in their relationships, they have the ability to navigate it in a much healthier way. So giving them that opportunity of almost like training them how to handle circumstances that might be tough in the moment, but now that they have maybe the experience of conversation with you, actually equips them further to make wiser choices later on. So, stopping in the moment, using real life experiences to help equip our kids in the future. What a great way to implement even today, even with your young ones, whether it's watching TV, listening to music, or even cartoons can be a great place to use everyday experiences to equip them. My other takeaway is modeling boundary behaviors with our own child. What we speak over our kids, what we enforce and allow them to get away with is teaching them that their worth and value within our home. And that translates into other relationships. So Jennifer used the example of her daughter is old enough now. She's a middle schooler. So of course she has opinions about all things, about maybe she's not comfortable having her post certain pictures of her now. If Jennifer had taken that moment and said, "No, I really like it. I don't see your problem with that," that would have educated her own daughter in saying, "Your opinion really doesn't matter to me." That then would translate to other relationships she has. Whereas in this case, Jennifer was highlighting, "No, I actually respected what my daughter had requested out of me, therefore setting the precedent of how other people should respect her values, her boundaries as well." So think about the power that you get to instill in your kids in your home that then translates further to relationships outside of your home. So let's go to my final takeaway. And I kind of mentioned it briefly with Jennifer as well, is that I am passionate about public school. I love that my kids are in public school. I worked as a clinician in public school, so I get to walk alongside kids every day in middle school and high school and really be there in the moment. The teachers that we have in the public school are amazing and they do so much. But over them is the school board. And over the school board, of course, is the government education board for the state. Now, that government education board is setting policies that now need to be implemented within our school system. Some of these are great, some of them I'm a little concerned about. And this is where we as parents need to be educated about what are these policies within our schools that these teachers need to implement, whether it's standardized testing or it's the expectations of moving on to the next grade. Again, we need to be educating our kids well. However, when these policies are changing the content that is happening within each class, and our kids are no longer able to take health class, for instance, which is now going to be something that our government educational board is discussing, is taking it out of the high school requirements. So people like Jennifer, who are a nonprofit that are allowed to come into our school system and talk about abstinence, talk about healthy relationships, talk about respecting yourself and respecting others, now those people are no longer able to be in our schools having those conversations due to a policy that is set at a government level. My kid is going to miss out on those conversations. Now, are we having them in our home? 100%. We sure are. But sometimes there's such power coming from a teacher, coming from someone else that can speak into my kids' lives about some of these important topics that should be addressed. So, my encouragement to you parents is to go out there, figure out what are the teacher standards that are coming down from school board or policy set at a federal level or a state level. Because what you might find out is they're not actually teaching some of the things that are pretty important. And again, our schools are not designed to teach our kids all things, just like our churches aren't designed to be the only discipleship your kids have. You are responsible to teach your kids these things within your home. That is your power and that is your right. And it is so exciting. And that's why this podcast exists, to equip you. That's why Homeward exists, to equip you and encourage you, to provide you resources to help your family succeed. However, we have to have a village and tribe. And so if you're using the public school system, just be aware what policies are in place. What are the teachers forced to integrate? What are they forced to take out? And making sure that if there's that option to have conversations like this, what Jennifer talked about today, making sure it happens within our schools. So, friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation today. Keep in mind that new episodes drop every Tuesday. So, I have awesome conversations again that hopefully equip and encourage you, bringing hope and health both inside your home and out. So, join me next week for another edition of Embracing Your Season.